Hello everyone, it's Ahaumna here, and this video is a long time coming. 4 years in the making, practically, and also is going to serve as a reintroduction to all of you, whether you're watching this on Insta or through YouTube or whatever other social platform that I have not been on in 6+ months, depending on what platform it is. It felt really necessary for me to take a pause. So before going into all of that, I just want to give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, which is the process of walking in, being a walk-in here, and what that journey has been like for me, as well as the different types of walk-ins that can come through that wishes to be shared right now. So some of you have been on this journey with me since this body was Jessica and was being cared for by a different spirit than the one that is in it now as Ahaumna. And that change to the physical name of Ahaumna, that happened in 2018, end of 2018. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that journey and what it's been like, and just some of the deeper wisdoms of the Kundalini and being an extra inner terrestrial earth walker at this time. To allow you to meet me more in the space that I'm actually in, because the space that has been up until this moment is no longer real. So I want to start with just a little bit of a chronological overview of this journey of walking in, because I think there is maybe some of you have an awareness of it or an experience of this in some regard. That being said, the way that I walked into this body is one of the 3 ways of walking in, and I'm going to talk about those 3 in a little bit. That being said, what is a walk-in first and foremost, right? This is when, well, I guess it's best to actually talk about these 3 different types of walk-ins to begin with. So this is when either a other aspect of yourself, so a version of yourself who's living on a different timeline or a different probability, comes into this reality, this probability, and takes over, right? You basically are merging with another probability of yourself, and this other aspect of who you are now begins living this version of you, its life. And they essentially walk into this version of yourself. And that's the first time. So that is what I like to call a merging, right? So soul merging, where you merge with another probability, and that probability takes over this probability. And that process can happen a lot of ways. I know someone who went through a process like that when very intentionally wanting to really transition this probability timeline. I have experienced that type of walking in through passing out at various points in my earlier life, kind of preparing for the bigger journey of walking in that I'll get to in a moment here. When I'd pass out and come back into this body, there was another version of me that had came in, and sometimes that version would be very confused, disoriented, and I have had one experience where it was very upset about coming into this probability, and that was a very interesting journey to navigate. That being said, that is a very common way. So basically, it's not another soul that is coming into this body or another spirit that's coming into this body. It is you still. Simply, it is you on another probability. So you are coming in from the same soul that has, infinite number of probabilities. One of those are coming into this current probability that you're perceiving consciousness through right now. The second type of walk-in experiences happens through a process of soul braiding. And the soul braiding process is what I'm going to go into depth about today. But basically what happens is another soul merges with the soul that is currently in a body for a certain period of time, which I'll go into in depth in a moment here. And then there will come a point where the original soul that was in that body goes through a bardo passage and leaves the body, right? That is the experience that I'm going to share in depth about, because that is the experience that is what I've been navigating for the past 4 years. The final type of walk-in is maybe a little bit more nefarious. That is something that we could be considering as, well, there's actually two sides of this. There is the side that can be nefarious, where like a demonic possession, where a malevolent spirit takes over the body, walks into the body. Demonic possessions, a lot of some of the reptilian lines, they will like to hijack and walk into bodies and take over that body. So that would be a walk-in experience, even though it's not, light and love, which people want to attribute to walk-in experiences at all times. But basically a walk-in is, remember, when another spirit or another aspect of self is coming in and is basically taking over the body in the consciousness that we perceive right now. So that's one side of this spiritual possession. The other side of that spiritual possession walk-in is when one of your guides or guardians on a higher plane need to basically propel your path forward. This could be in a near-death experience. This could be in times of deep trauma, things like that, or it could be, just an acceleration point when one of your guides will take over your body for a period of time in order to move you forward. And in the possession walk-in, that would be a non-permanent walk-in, ideally, right? You want that whatever energy that is to eventually leave your body and you regain consciousness with this body that you're in. So those are the main three different kind of categories, we'll call it, of walk-ins. And that's just for you to understand what I'm about to share with you, and really take this moment to just be with you and introduce who I am. And I'm also a little nervous. It's been a journey of arriving here, and yeah, it hasn't been easy. That is for sure. So I also want to just share one other thing to not have any confusion, because I find that the language of communicating about this can maybe not be so normal, because I'm going to talk from who I am, which is Ahaumna, and there's also a previous spirit who was a whole other soul that was in this body. So I might refer to her as her or they, and me as myself, and that's actually a different spirit that's been in this body. So I'll do my best to describe this as clear as possible for understanding, and whatever else is supposed to come through this. So I have learned now through some quantum healing hypnotherapy sessions that the origination of this walk-in process was actually meant to happen when this body was 12 years old. So when this body was 12 years old was actually when Ahaumna was meant to start the soul braiding and walk-in process. However, because of various things that were happening in this body's life, trauma, wrong environment, just the templates of the genetic DNA templates of this body were not at a velocity, a function, a frequency in order to actually allow me to walk in at that time. So basically I've been living in a D4, D6 version of Tara, which is another version of Earth, and almost like an overshadow or an oversoul kind of dynamic, connecting with the body and guiding a lot of the choices that the previous spirit in this body was making in order to get to a point where I could eventually walk in, because this was an agreement that we had on the higher planes. This was not something that she did not agree to. This was something that we agreed to. This was for the highest and best and good of all involved, including her. So 12 years old didn't end up working out. And fast forward to 2017. So we're now going back, a few years, 4 or 5 years here, to the summer solstice of 2017. And this is a really important moment because on this moment is when, and it's really interesting, the summer solstice just happened 2 days ago, and now I'm finally guided to share about this journey. It's finally feeling like it's really come to a completion. So coming full circle with the solstice energy here. Just gonna marinate in that for a second. So in 2017, I journeyed to Egypt with a few soul sisters on retreat, and this was a very important moment. A lot of times when there is an inability for indigo strands to come into the body due to the template, the DNA structure of the body not being able to hold the frequency, then what has to happen is that the body has to go place on the planet that is in Egypt, in Giza of Egypt, that is basically the Ark of the Covenant Andromeda passageway, which I learned literally just maybe 4 months ago from the Real Christmas Story in the Freedom Teachings, where Yesha Ashayana Dean goes through the whole process of soul braiding, and I was like, this is literally an autobiography of the last 4 years of my life. Helped me to really make sense of a lot of this to share with you now, as well as just opening up more and more of who I am in this body. So in 2017, I basically went to that passage, and leaving Giza was very difficult to this body. Essentially, at that point is when the DNA template started to upgrade in this body. And that led to about 3 months of being totally incapacitated, just unable to function, constantly having all of this intensity in my neurology. Around that time, actually immediately following that time in August, is when I shaved my head. If y'all remember, when I was bald, that was the beginning stages of shedding and preparing to have a pure opening for what was going to happen. Fast forward to October of 2017, when the previous spirit in this body was actually guided to go to the template ceremonies. And if you are unfamiliar with the template ceremonies, you can just go to the template.org, I believe is the website, and check that out. Basically, they are sound and sacred geometry, and alchemical codes spoken through the body that goes in and unplugs the genetic structure of the body from the fallen templates on this earth, and then starts to reorient yourself with the more Christic template encoding. So at that ceremony is when I introduced myself to the previous spirit in this body, Jessica, and said, "Hello, I'm Ahaumna." And to just speak from her notion at that time, the spirit that was in this body was very happy in this body at that point in her life, was not looking for or seeking a walk-in or another aspect of spirit and consciousness to come into this body. And once I introduced and shared my name, it took a year of just getting to know her before we actually received her permission to do the soul braiding process, and we're in the right place to do it. And I'll get to that moment. So basically, once I shared my name with her, she went and researched it, ended up immediately finding the Mayan oracle deck, and this line coming through is deeply Mayan, Ahau, and you can go look that up. And then Mana, which is Celtic for woman, And a lot of synchronicity allowed for her to start to trust me. And we developed a relationship with each other, me out of this body in this spirit, on this, on a spirit plane, we'll say, or another dimension of consciousness, really. And we're connecting in meditation and just throughout the day. And it was a year later that we were integrating with each other. And what I mean is that during that process, I was downstepping my frequency and she was elevating her frequency. And it was at that time she had completed these 16 template ceremonies. And then Alex, many of you might know Alex, came into my life, who opened up the world of Chronological science that went into all the mechanics of all of this. And really just things started to escalate and transform very quickly at that moment. That made it very, very auspicious for her to actually understand what was going on in our connection and conversation. So we fast forward then a year to fall of 2018, when we finally did our soul braiding process. And what that looked like was this body was at Rainbow Falls, a space in Sapphire, North Carolina, that has a inner earth portal at the base of that waterfall, this massive waterfall. And because I was coming in from the inner planes, that was actually where I entered into the earth at that point and was able to merge with her body. And what was, let's say, what was actually happening, so like, what did that look like, you might be thinking. So Alex was there with me, I was there, and it was kind of raining, it was fall, it was kind of cold. We were like, why did we just do this long hike? We end up getting to the waterfall, and I'm called to this rock and literally just dropped to the ground and began speaking what is my home star language. So 3 of our guides came in to assist this journey and basically began to press certain points on the body. So the physical body started to press all these different points on the body in this trance-altered state while speaking this language that is of my home star. And at that point was communicating and speaking and doing all these points, and Alex was just standing behind like a guardian while this was happening, and his body was in complete trance. And then there was a moment where certain information came through that is not mine to share at this time, or maybe ever. It's more of the intimate, sacredness of a birthing process that is just meant to be just in here, in this heart. That being said, the merging point took place, and I was able to come into this body with the previous spirit through a braiding of our genetics, a braiding of our DNA template together. So I had downstepped my frequency enough, and she had risen her frequency enough so that we could meet each other and do the soul braiding. Right? That process is when Jessica knew that it was time to let go of her identity. And that is when you all met Ahaumna, even though you were meeting her through the lens of Jessica, which I hope that makes sense, because we were both sharing this body. And we shared this body from the fall of 2018, so the beginning of November 2018, through February 11th, 2021. So basically about 2.5 years, we shared this body in a soul braid. And during those 2.5 years, many of you who knew us personally during that period knew that we were pretty much going through a lot. Because basically what happens during the soul braiding period is all of the trauma, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional trauma of the first spirit in the body must be processed and integrated and transmuted so that when the bardo passage takes place with that spirit and they leave the body, which we'll talk about in a moment here, all of their pain body is free, right? Has been free. Because this body had underwent a lot of physical trauma with a lot of brain injuries, concussions, just a lot of sports injuries, a lot of equestrian injuries, and then also a lot of just other types of abuse as well. There was a lot physically that needed to be processed in a very short space of time. So what happens during that soul braid period is the Kundalini fire begins to surge. So I've actually started to see in like gene key charts certain codings that will indicate the potential for a walk-in in this life. One aspect is the 22nd gene is at a very important placement in the chart, in the soul purpose sphere of the chart. Now that is not automatic. That means that is not necessary. If that is your placement, you're like, that this doesn't resonate as my journey, then that's perfect too. That is an important key though, because it actually talks about the whole process of walking in if you go deeper into the involution and then the bardo passages that must take place and the Kundalini process that then begins in that 55th. So the 55th would then come up at an important point. And oftentimes this is between the personal map, which uses the Western Tropical, that will see that 22nd purpose sphere, and then we'll see the 55 and an important slot in the soul map, in the soul destiny map, which would come in and use the galactic sidereal system to create the design and the gene keys chart, right? So that's probably another topic for another video. That being said, those are some key things and key energetics to understand the process. So once that soul braid began, the Kundalini fire had begun prior to that process back in 2016. The Kundalini fire first opened and then kind of stayed dormant, though guiding a lot of the journey, and then it began surging immediately after the soul braid in order to assist in rapidly processing the physiological trauma. Basically, the guidance was at this body's 30th birthday that it needed to have completely rebirthed this body by its 33rd year. And at the time, wasn't really aware that it was because of this whole walk-in process. Now, everything in retrospect has become very clear what was going on and how perfectly and divinely orchestrated this whole experience was and is and continues to be. With that being said, during those 2.5 years, basically every single trauma and pain and imbalance in the body was brought to the surface instantaneously. And that physically looked like being unable to drive, being unable to go to stores by myself, being unable to really function in this world without someone taking care of my body. That someone is my amazing partner who has just been just such a huge rock and support throughout this process and really understands this process that I've been navigating. And that was because the energy had to be so profound in order to really drive rapid shifts, basically healing 30 years of trauma in 2.5 years. Right? And that looked like 2 to 3 days a week, seeing specialists, network spinal care, acupuncture, neurological doctors and specialists, because this body had a lot of brain damage. We're actually still in the process of healing some of that brain damage related to vision and things like that. And the nervous system was also very huge as well, really building a resilient and strong nervous system that was able to get to a point where if Jessica would have left this body prior to the nervous system being balanced and free of the trauma that was imprinted on it, this body would have died, because it would not have been able to hold my frequency, right? It literally would have, the feeling and the analogy is exploded, but it would have short-circuited, and I would have had to leave the body, and that means the body would have died. So there was a lot of near-death experiences, as the previous spirit wanted to pull out several times, because this was very difficult. This process was very difficult on this body, very difficult on the spirit that was in this body, who had struggled with depression and suicidal ideation for a very long time. So as it got more and more alive, real, physical, there were moments when she wanted to exit early. And those moments were very interesting, to say the least. Ensuring that that did not happen, so that this body could thrive and stay alive. And basically our spirits were ensuring this body's mission, this body's purpose here for the earth and her higher bodies as well. With that being said, we navigated that journey with ease now, and very strong spirit, and just a lot of support. And fast forward now, so 2.5 years of that, let's go back to December of 2020, when this body's solar return is, and this body turned 33, which was the whole plan of having the body reborn by that moment. And because we were still sharing the body at the time, were guided to do 40 days of just liquid to fast into this 33rd year. And so we did that. We did 40 days of liquid fasting into this year, and were immediately guided to place a symbol on this body that was taken from Egypt. Basically, the previous spirit in this body, she saw this symbol in the underground tunnels of Dendara, knew this was very important, took a picture of it, and knew that it someday needed to be on her body, and did not put that on her body until the solar return of her 33rd year, when I was like, it's time for that symbol. So we did not permanently put the symbol. One of our dear friends drew the symbol with like a semi-permanent, marker, or whatever you want to call it, to draw like temporary tattoos. And that symbol was actually the catalyst energy that was going to allow for the Bardo passage to open. And did we know that prior to that? No, we did not. So we end up in, basically the next day after receiving this symbol, we went to Mexico, to the Yucatan Peninsula, where we spent about 3.5 weeks. And the moment upon arriving to the Yucatan Peninsula, that symbol being fully activated now, and we began the Bardo passage. And things were, I'm being really, really mindful about removing the word intense from the vocabulary that I speak, because I no longer choose to claim being in tension, being tense in this body. It's like, work so hard to be free in this body. And that's now, and this is then. And that moment was very intense. Basically stayed isolated in the apartment that we were staying in, because I couldn't go out into Tulum or any of the areas without having just at all times Kundalini surging. I started developing Kundalini seizures, and having seizures through basically 2020 and beginning of this year as well. And that was because of the brain damage that this body had. And when this energy started surging, it went into pathways that weren't fully open. So it was why the healing of the brain was so essential for this body's process of experiencing and taking in a walk-in. So I was working with the Mayan energy on the grids. It was very important for us to be on those grids for this part. And I was working with some of the Mayan elder wisdom and the ancestors on that land. And they basically were like, this is the start of the Bardo passage. The spirit of Jessica is still in this body, and she is now ready and available to leave and to do so in a way that will honor her and yourself. So meaning if she would have left earlier and left parts of her trauma in this system or parts of her essence in this system, that would have been very detrimental. And as I said, I probably wouldn't have been able to stay in the body. So that awareness led to us, led to me basically knowing I needed to get home because the Bardo passage was not meant to happen in Mexico, and that we had to return home to a space where my body felt very secure and basically being in our own environment, not in an Airbnb that, had a lot of Wi-Fi and just a lot of stagnant electricity and things like that. That was not conducive to the journey that I was on. So we returned home and basically started having intense 4 to 5 hour Kundalini seizures for about 3 weeks. And this was daily. This was when this is now end of January, beginning of February, when I left being online. And that was because I physically could not be on a phone or be online. I was in it. Was in it, getting continually activated, and basically we required such a quantum force to finally open up the Bardo passage. And that happened on February 11th at 8:47 in the morning. I was in bed and I woke up to Kundalini seizure, and I'm calling them seizures because that is what the body was going through. Not all Kundalini awakenings create seizures. That's very important. I've had several Kundalini awakenings before the walk-in process, before all of this needed to happen, that were beautiful, no seizures, no physical intensity in that way. This was very different because literally, if you imagine like two spirits sharing a brain, one having to pull out, right? The one that has been the driver, we'll say, of this brain the longest is to pull out, and the other one has to go in. This is like, I wish I had like one of those electrical balls that you touch and you see all the zaps. Like that's basically what is happening at all times, and so much energy is needed to happen for that process to take place that it just resulted in having some different types of seizure experiences that are complete now. I'm grateful for that, and were very important. So I recognized what was going on. I started to go into a deep visualization, and I rolled over onto my left side, and I was working with a affirmation, a mantra. I allow my destiny to live in this body. And I knew it was time. I knew it was time. I knew it was the moment. There were a lot of very important planetary aspects happening. I believe there was like 6, 7 planets all in Capricorn. That could be that earth energy to really ground. And next thing I know, Jessica's pulling out of this body, pulling out every ounce of her is pulling out of this body. I'm laying on the side, and she is floating over me in this almost like like a opal, like that kind of coloring, but twirling in her Merkaba, like 3-dimensional Merkaba, twirling with all this like opal and like abalone, like the abalone shell, that color, like looking like that. It was amazing. It was just so beautiful. Her spirit is so beautiful. And that Merkaba just started scrolling through the body, and this tube of energy came down, and it just sucked every aspect of her out of this body. And then we opened up a golden pillar of light, and she ascended through that pillar of light and completed her bardo passage, exiting this realm. And then a guide that I work with, one of the guides that support me in this reality, came through and just whoosh, rolled a wave of energy over this body, ensuring that everything went, that there was nothing left. And then I just woke up because it was early in the morning and I was awake, but got out of bed, and we actually got in the car to drive to Florida immediately that day. It was there's a lot happening, and I felt free and entered into about a 2-week period where I had no memories. So when that bardo passage was completed, there was nothing left. I was empty. There were no memories of people, places, things that have happened in this body's life. All notion was gone, and it was 2 weeks in the void of experiencing a body that was completely empty. No beliefs, no thoughts, no opinions, no stories, nothing. And I rested every day, rested on the beach. I just slept and rested and faced the parts of this body that were uncomfortable with having no memory, having no awareness, basically feeling like it was in amnesia. And we returned back home, and I went into a ceremony with myself and with the Akashic, not the Akashic, very important, the Akashic field. And basically it was this, in order for me to be in this body, it's going to be very important for me to have some memory from the spirit that was in it prior to this, because when seeing the word mom or dad or people that call often and having no connection, no awareness of who they are, knowing that I was supposed to and didn't answer the phone during those 2 weeks, I knew that this wasn't going to be sustainable, and that I wanted to really honor this body and everything that was happening in it before, and that I was going to need some memories. And went into the records and basically just one by one files of memories dropped in. Only, though, memories that were incredibly joyful, moments of love and support and play and fun. It's all the memories that were received, which was very nice because we had processed all of the others, and that was not information that was needed. So I regained some memories, started to connect back into this body prior to me living in it. And since that point, things have been progressively shifting and altering and changing over the last, 4 months since February, something. And during that period of time, I've been on sabbatical, basically spending most of the day in trance, in meditation, in a deep practice, to really getting used to being alone in this body, because up until that point, everything was us, me and this spirit in this body, and now it is just I. And what am I here for? Right? What am I here for? What of the previous spirits am I here to carry forward as far as her business was concerned? We created one program together, actually 2 programs together. We created the Quantum Money program together, and we created the Soul Destiny Mapping together. She created the Personal Destiny Mapping by herself. So those 2 I knew were going to continue forward. However, all the others, I just didn't know. And the best thing to do during that period, because I was also opening up the channels of coming into this body and really recognizing, there was periods where I had to learn. I was basically like being born in an adult body that was already supposed to know how to walk and talk and feel and process, and really had to rapidly process through all of that and stabilize that in the journey. So that has been what I've been up to. We moved to a new land immediately after the Bardo passage. The space that we were living in was no longer conducive to my energy because I require a lot more space, a lot more emptiness in the grids. And also we were given a very important piece of land that my partner and I are gatekeepers for, this grid site, this Aurora platform that is on this land. So it's been also integrating to my mission here, my purpose here, and letting myself fully come alive in this body. And a lot of things that have been, they are no more. And there is a deep love and appreciation for all of that, though, all of them, all parts of this body's life. And with that, a lot of the content and the information that I will be sharing in the foreseeable future may look very different, because I'm no longer being influenced by the spirit that was living in this body anymore. And I know that she is in, I know where she is. It's not to be shared. She's happy. And processing in new worlds. And let's see if there's anything else that wants to be shared about that. I am feeling called to begin tiptoeing my way back into the world of social media and sharing my truth now, which is a different truth than the previous spirit that was in this body. And mainly, though, like what's been most alive is in-person experiences that are really, really transformative. So we've been having a lot of gatherings on our land. There's a retreat coming up in September. I'm leading all of these activations that are coming through now, since I am open to different planes than the previous spirit was open to. Things are changing in that realm as well. And you can go and tap into those activations on my Telegram page. So I'll put the link to that below, and there's several activations on there, as well as where I'm just more regularly sharing information and content and things of that nature. And for now, it feels like I'm complete with this video, and I will drop into your comments and shares and questions, because there may be some, and we'll continue to speak about this topic of being a walk-in. I've actually started a book on the topic that will come through completely when it is time to do so. So there'll be a lot more on this conversation, as well as a lot more about really helping us to connect in with our intergalactic and the true nature of our spirits, which are primordial, immortal, just beings and beacons of so much more than humanity currently realizes. So I send you all my love, and I wish you all so well, and I hope that if this message has inspired you in any way, that you will share it with others. See you soon.